A worldwide political and monetary showdown is unfolding, one that pits the formidable former U.S. President Donald Trump in opposition to Burkina Faso's resolute leader, President Ibrahim Traoré. This isn't always just a dispute over trade price lists. It's a defining moment that signals a shift in international electricity dynamics. For many years, smaller nations like Burkina Faso were overshadowed within the global area, their economic future susceptible to rules crafted hundreds of miles away. But now, underneath Traoré's leadership, Burkina Faso stands firm. Hard America's America First protectionist timetable and annoying fairness on the worldwide stage. Can Burkina Faso and the broader African continent resist the monetary pressures exerted by way of the sector's largest economic system? Is President Ibrahim Traoré the courageous voice Africa needs to reclaim its economic future? And how will America reply to this unparalleled task? In early 2024, former President Donald Trump again to the global stage with a powerful revival of his nationalist monetary doctrine, America First. Central to this renewed timetable becoming competitive tariff policy, one that aimed to scale down imports, guard American jobs, and reindustrialize America's economic system. Under the new exchange framework, steep tariffs were placed on a wide array of imported goods, specifically raw substances and agricultural products from growing countries. Burkina Faso, a West African state still rebuilding from a long time of colonial extraction and current-day financial dependency, located itself squarely within the crosshairs. Major exports like cotton, uncooked gold, shea butter, and processed agricultural goods confronted extreme change restrictions in the U.S. marketplace. Suddenly, these merchandise became too high-priced and less attractive to American consumers. The immediate impact was devastating. Burkina Faso's export sales plummeted with reduced foreign profits. Government investments in infrastructure, training, and public health started to sluggish. The country's fragile increase turned into strangled by means of a policy it had no element in creating. Small farmers misplaced contracts. Local industries not able to pivot fast started out downsizing. The ripple outcomes touched each nook of Burkinabe society. For the U.S., this will have been a calculated step in the direction of economic resurgence. But for nations like Burkina Faso, it felt like monetary warfare, a punishment for bold to compete in a global marketplace long dominated by way of the industrialized North. Yet now not all people could be given this quietly. In the dusty corridors of Ouagadougou's authorities' homes, one voice grew louder, clearer, and more defiant. President Ibrahim Traoré turned into getting ready to combat again now, not only for Burkina Faso but for the dignity of all growing countries. President Ibrahim Traoré did not cringe. While many inside the global south would possibly have resigned themselves to financial submission, Traoré did the opposite. He launched one of the maximum formidable and comprehensive counteroffensives any African leader has taken in current records, in opposition to U.S. exchange dominance. His first circulate cross-international, Traoré took the struggle instantly to the very best international tiers, the United Nations and the World Trade Organization. There, status before delegates from across the world, he denounced the price lists as modern-day colonialism and disease tactic, utilized by the powerful to the rising. His voice changed into calm but organization. His message was unmistakable. Africa will now not be given economic enslavement masked as unfastened alternate. Next, he grew to become inward to shield the country's monetary lifelines. The Burkinabe government hastily imposed a ban on high-tariff U.S. imports inclusive of business equipment, processed foods, and luxury patron goods. But Traoré failed to prevent at mere retaliation. He used the instant to ignite a wave of neighborhood manufacturing. Ministries coordinated with farmers, engineers, and manufacturers to update imports with home options. This wasn't only exchange warfare. It became a conflict for financial sovereignty. Then got here the masterstroke. The formation of the Sahel Economic Sovereignty Alliance, CESAR. A nearby exchange bloc of African international locations decided to resist Western economic strain, led with the aid of Traoré. CESAR won help from Mali, Niger, Chad, and Guinea. Their project: create an internal marketplace strong sufficient to resist external manipulation. It became the primary time in many years that these international locations spoke with a united voice on economics, safety, and self-willpower. And past Africa, Traoré looked to opportunity powers: China, India, Brazil, and Russia. Through quiet diplomacy and speedy deal-making, Burkina Faso secured bilateral alternate agreements that bypassed Western tariffs altogether. These new alliances presented improvement loans, technology partnerships, and infrastructure initiatives without the usual strings attached. At home, those actions converted Ibrahim Traoré from a countrywide reformer right into a regional progressive. But the query remained, how could the West End, especially Donald Trump, reply to this rising African resistance? Donald Trump failed to wait lengthy to reply. In a televised address from Mar-a-Lago, the USA president did what he does, besitted hard and loud. He categorized Ibrahim Traoré as a thorough destabilizer and warned that Burkina Faso become turning into a hub for anti-American aggression beneath the guise of financial nationalism. He accused Traoré of endangering global markets and undermining years of Western improvement, useful resource inside the Sahel location. Trump's phrases have been echoed through a chorus of political commentators on foremost U.S. networks. Headlines flashed throughout American media. Burkina Faso threatens international exchange balance. Is Africa turning in opposition to the West? Traoré's rebellion, a new axis of resistance. The framing changed into planned. Traoré became not a reformer. He changed into a disruptor. Behind the scenes, Washington moved unexpectedly. Diplomats have been deployed to African capitals, urging governments to distance themselves from the Sahel bloc. Economic resource applications have been quietly reviewed, and in some instances behind schedule. Intelligence briefings commenced, such as reviews on Burkina Faso's alliances with China and Russia, hinting at potential safety dangers. But perhaps maximum telling become the shift in tone from American think tanks and exchange lobbyists. Reports emerged recommending tighter regulations on African imports, improved surveillance of anti-globalist governments, and new economic mechanisms to comprise what they called the Traoré Doctrine. Traoré's movements had hit a nerve. He wasn't just resisting a tariff. He was tough, a worldwide machine built on Western dominance, and but for thousands and thousands across Africa and the growing global, his stance became not reckless. It turned into righteous. Traoré had ended up something uncommon in modern geopolitics. A head of state inclined to danger isolation to demand equity. This clash between a getting older empire and a rising rebel was not just about economics. It had turned out to be a referendum on the future of global management. Inside Burkina Faso, President Ibrahim Traoré's bold stance towards U.S. price lists didn't initiate worry. It sparked transformation. His authorities' decisive pivot toward monetary self-reliance ignited a surge of civic delight now not visible in decades. Across rural provinces and urban centers alike, people began to speak of Lin Pond real independent music, but in exercise. Local farmers, once depending on overseas consumers, now obtained assist from country F-funded cooperatives to method and sell their items regionally and within the Sahel Economic Sovereignty Alliance. Corn, millet, cotton, and shea butter, once undervalued by way of international markets, became vital equipment of countrywide resistance. Farmers had been now not simply manufacturers. They had been patriots. Traoré's administration ramped up domestic production incentives, presenting tax breaks and subsidies to entrepreneurs, making an investment in agriculture, manufacturing, and renewable power. New education centers had been opened in Ouagadougou, Bobo, Doulasso, and Kaya, teaching export logistics, global trade law, and nearby value addition. Suddenly, exporting wasn't the job of some eliter, changed into turning into a national undertaking. Socially, his actions rekindled a sense of purpose in a population lengthy upset by way of foreign interference and financial hardship. University college students marched in assist of Traoré's selections. Labor unions, usually skeptical of presidency policies, voiced approval as new jobs started out to seem in production zones and agrich cooperatives. Even non-secular leaders, both Muslim and Christian, issued joint statements endorsing the kingdom's push for economic sovereignty. In sermons and prayer gatherings, the phrase Burkina Faso will upward push echoed as each a blessing and a vow. But with this rising tide of national delight got here mounting pressure, and Traoré knew that the direction he had selected could now not come without dangers, both from inside and beyond. But no revolution is without resistance. As Burkina Faso surged forward with Traoré's radical reforms, fault traces commenced to emerge now not just from outdoor powers, but from inside the nation's personal political establishment. Some high-ranking officials and previous ministers lengthy entangled in overseas exchange networks and aid businesses commenced to question the information of confronting a sitting U.S. president. They warned of financial isolation, sanctions and the freezing of global credit score lines. Quiet competition fermented in boardrooms and return channels mainly among people who once benefited from Western-aligned change offers. Western embassies in Ouagadougou improved their visibility. Meetings at the back of closed doorways with opposition figures became extra frequent. Analysts in the government suspected intelligence hobby, geared toward figuring out weaknesses in Traoré's coalition. Meanwhile, foreign-funded NOSs started issuing important reports about authoritarianism and monetary nationalism, long past too far, attempting to reshape the narrative and erode famous aid at the identical time Traoré's government had to cope with real inner risks. Inflation ticked upward due to the initial disruption in imported items. Certain business sectors struggled to fulfill neighborhood call for. Black market buyers frequently tied to nearby smuggling networks tried to exploit the instability. But possibly the finest danger wasn't economic. It turned into mental. Western media narratives commenced portraying Burkina Faso as a rogue state, a narrative that sowed doubt among a few urban elites and commercial enterprise proprietors. For Traoré, the conflict for national sovereignty wasn't handiest being fought in factories or parliaments became being fought in humans' minds. And yet, amidst the noise, the president's approval rankings soared. His speeches drew crowds. His insistence on dignity over dependency resonated now not best with the operating, bad, however, with the developing generation of young Burkina, who had regarded handiest poverty and overseas manage in a global increasingly more described by monetary coercion and digital propaganda. Ibrahim Traoré became redefining what it intended to steer in the international South. But this inner resilience might soon be tested with the aid of even greater forces beyond Africa's borders. In Washington, the lighting fixtures of the Oval Office burned past due into the night. President Donald Trump, now in his second time period, beneath the revived slogan, "Maintain America First," changed into not about to backtrack from a mission by means of a small African kingdom. But this time something became special. When Ibrahim Traoré took the floor on the United Nations General Assembly and denounced U.S. tariff guidelines by call, pinnacle officials within the White House and Pentagon noticed it no longer simply as political theater, however as the beginning of a brand new wave of resistance from the global South, and for Trump that was unacceptable. The U.S. Treasury hastily positioned Burkina Faso below a monetary watch list for disruptive alternate practices. The Office of the USA Trade Representative USR announced it changed into reviewing additional sanctions, starting from freezing the assets of Burkina Bay authorities officials to suspending ERA transfers, logistics assist and financial useful resource. A $120 million bilateral help package from USAID turned into indefinitely suspended. Trump, by no means one to waste a political opportunity, turned the disaster into a rallying point. Speaking at a campaign-style occasion in Iowa, he categorized Traoré, a radical agitator dragging Africa into chaos, warning that America will no longer sit idly even as rogue states undermine the worldwide exchange order we constructed. Fox News and different proper-leaning media shops ran tales portray Burkina Faso as a reckless regime threatening American jobs and international balance. Traoré turned into portrayed as a risky populist challenging the regulations-based order that within the eyes of Washington needed to be neutralized. On the Navy, the front, the Pentagon accelerated drone surveillance over the Sahel beneath ARICOM, formally to reveal terrorist actions. Unofficially, they had been watching Traoré. Any signs and symptoms of overseas weapons, shipments, Russian mercenaries, or Chinese infrastructure tasks had been flagged. The Trump administration additionally compelled allies. France, the United Kingdom, Germany, Canada comply with suit. A quiet, however powerful diplomatic freeze set in. Embassies scaled again operations in Ouagadougou. Western banks tightened monetary controls, delaying or denying transfers inside and out of the United States of America. For Traoré, the squeeze changed into on. Yet even as Burkina Faso changed into increasingly more isolated, Traoré stood firm. And within the shadows of Western condemnation, new allies had been stepping forward. As Washington intensified its strain marketing campaign, something unexpected started to occur throughout the global South. From Latin America to Southeast Asia to the dusty borders of West Africa, ripple of resistance become forming. Burkina Faso under Ibrahim Traoré become no longer status by myself. In South America, Brazilian President Ricardo Monteiro, recognized for his left nationalist rhetoric, publicly declared his aid for Burkina Faso's right to financial self-willpower. "We recognize what it is like to be punished for trying sovereignty," he stated at some stage in a speech in Brasilia. Trade delegations were quick dispatched to Ouagadougou with discussions starting from agricultural change to power cooperation. In Asia, India extended bilateral ties, providing generation help for Burkina's agriculture and fintech sectors. Meanwhile, Chinese media stores started out portraying Traoré as a symbol of the brand new African dignity, framing his defiance of Trump's tariffs as part of a broader decolonial motion. In Russia, kingdom-owned energy agencies signed long-time period offers with Burkina Faso for mining operations and infrastructure guide, bypassing U.S.-ruled monetary systems. Russian military advisors additionally quietly started out supporting with border defense and cyber protection. And then came the actual shock. The African Union held an emergency summit in Addis Ababa. For the primary time in recent memory, the continent turned into united in the back of one voice. The summit produced a sharp communique condemning unilateral financial aggression and endorsed the creation of a Pan-African Monetary Protection Fund to protect countries from overseas monetary blackmail. Even in Europe, cracks started out to show. Youthful weather and decolonial actions in France, and Belgium staged protests in harmony with Burkina Faso. Hashtags like Variety, Stand with Burkina, and Range Traoré is proper started, trending across activist circles. In reaction to the worldwide momentum, Traoré, known as a unique session of the Sahel Economic Sovereignty Alliance (CESAR). 10 nations joined 8% to reduce greenback dependency, boost intra-African alternate, and boost up nearby industrialization. They even proposed a digital forex provisionally referred to as AfriCoin to bypass SWIFT and IMF-backed credit structures. What began as a neighborhood reaction to punitive U.S. tariffs had now snowballed into something a long way larger. A coordinated challenge to the worldwide economic order. A turning of the tide in the long war over who controls development. For the primary time in many years, a sitting African president had now not most effective stated no to Washington, but had stimulated a new generation of nations to rethink the very phrases of their engagement with the West. The old device sanctions, stress isolation were dropping their electricity, and in this emerging technology of multipolar defiance, the following battleground could not be fought simplest in speeches or change deals. It would be ideological. It could be moral. It would be generational. In a global where superpowers have lengthy dictated the guidelines of the sport, Burkina Faso, a small state inside the heart of the Sahelis, grow to be a symbol of defiance, not with guns now, not with significant overseas reserves, but with something a ways greater daunting to the vintage powers, an unyielding will. President Donald Trump may additionally consider his tariff rules, will pressure poorer international locations to bend the knee. But he did not anticipate the upward thrust of a younger chief who couldn't be sold, who might now not be afraid, who refused to rely Ibrahim Traoré. Traoré did no longer simply react to injustice. He built a clean approach of war of words, calling for local team spirit, leveraging technology, launching a worldwide media marketing campaign, and igniting the spirit of self-reliance. More importantly, he made the arena ask a question it had never asked loudly enough. Why ought to small nations bear in financial version imposed by means of the powerful? And what occurs after they dare to thrust back? We are witnessing something rare. A worldwide power shift now not waged with guns but with courage. Burkina Faso has chosen the hard direction, yet it is this direction that inspires thousands and thousands from Lagos to Lima, from Jakarta to Johannesburg to rise up and reclaim, manipulate in their monetary destinies. If you believe the arena is prepared for a brand new order, in which the voices of small nations carry weight, in which fairness isn't a privilege but a right, please proportion this tale. Let Burkina Faso's voice be heard a ways and huge, and in no way underestimate the power of a small kingdom, whilst led with the aid of a leader who refuses to bow. Let us begin with a heartfelt prayer for Africa, a continent wealthy in history, way of life, and resilience. We pray for peace to blanket the giant landscapes of Burkina Faso, and every nation striving for dignity and self-determination. May the human beings of Burkina Faso discover power amid worry, courage within the face of adversity, and hope that in no way fades. We ask for divine steering for President Ibrahim Traoré, a leader who incorporates the weight of a nation's dreams on his shoulders. May his selections be wise, his spirit unbreakable, and his imaginative and prescient clear as he leads Burkina Faso in the direction of economic sovereignty and real freedom.